joy and happiness as we enter in this third week of Advent. Joy and happiness. What is it in your life that brings you joy? What brings you joy? It's a rhetorical question. Don't answer it out loud. But what brings you joy? It may be something like listening to your favorite comedian. Any Nate Bargatze fans out there? I love Nate Bargatze because he's clean and he's hilarious and makes fun of church culture, which I grew up in, the 90s Christians, which are, as he says, the most Christian of all the Christians. Maybe it's watching your kids enjoy something like in a couple of weeks as we watch our children open up presents and the amount of joy that fills the room. Those are exciting times, aren't they? Maybe it's something like watching your favorite Christmas movie as a family, like watching an 8-year-old defeat 2 lifetime criminals in a house all by himself. What brings you joy or happiness? And so for most of my life, I have been taught or I have been preached at that joy and happiness are two very different things. The joy is something, it goes something like this. The joy is something that is deep-seated in the heart, that is not based off of circumstances, but that happiness is something that is based off of what's happening around us. Like it's fleeting, right? It can go away really quickly. We're going to go back to Luke chapter 2 today, and what I'm going to do today, hopefully, at the end of this message, we'll see that and really challenge this idea that joy and happiness are somehow separate from one another, but they are actually the very same thing that we're longing and looking for during this season. So Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. We were here last week, we're here again this week because it tells the entire story clearly, but let's look at what the shepherd's experience was. It says this, and in the same region, there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with great fear. And the angel said to them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." You know, we sing songs every Christmas time about joy. Many of you have cut out wooden letters in your front yard that are painted red that scream joy to your neighbors, right? It's on Christmas cards. It's all over this. We talk about joy, but what does it look like for us as followers of Jesus to actually live with joy and happiness? What does that look like? Because the reality of following Jesus is it is not just a theory that we hold on to. It is not just a theory that we say, that's a good idea or a set of ideals, but it is something that we can grab onto that has handlebars to say, this is the life that God is calling us to live. What does it look like for a follower of Jesus to live with joy in this season? And so joy and happiness are not just a thought, they're not just a feeling, but it's practical. And so here's the first thing that I want you to know this morning is that joy has come through the person of Jesus. Joy has come through the person and the work of Jesus. Now, this is not to slam anyone or to say that if you have been a part of these kinds of situations that you are over the top or extreme. I'm going to make fun of you, but just act like I'm a comedian for a second. But when Lindsay and I were having babies, it really wasn't the craze of like the gender reveal thing yet. Do y'all know where I'm going with this? The gender reveal craze, right? Like in our day, like you would post a picture or have somebody create a graphic and you'd post it on and like everybody's like, oh, congratulations. You know, that was it. That was all there was. And now people go out of their minds to express the gender of the baby, right? Like I've seen some where they take a baseball, that's exploding baseball, and they hit the baseball and it explodes out in color. That one's kind of cool. I've seen some where they actually attach something to the back tire of a car and they burn rubber and the colors come out, and I'm thinking, I bet the wife is just like loving that one. And then another one, which is my favorite, is when they pull out the confetti cannons and they accidentally shoot their spouse. Like there is something about those moments. Why are they excited? Because They have been entrusted with this child, right? They learn this gender and this boy or this girl, and they're thrilled, they're excited, they're jumping up and down. We get joy just watching the videos of other people's experience because we know, hey, they've just been entrusted with this baby. This account that we just read in Luke chapter 2 is an ancient gender reveal. That's what's happening here in Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. It says that born this day is a child, the Messiah. Is this Emmanuel, God with us? This is the longing of the people of God for thousands of years, for generation after generation, that they have been waiting and longing for this Messiah, this Savior to come to rescue the people of God. And finally, there's this announcement. He's here. He's here. From brokenness to the fullness of kingdom, being ushered in by Jesus. And Luke states it this really interesting way back in verse 10. He says this, and an angel said to them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people." Now, an interesting thing to do is when we're reading passages of scripture like this, to put yourself in the middle of the story, not as like the main character, but put yourself in the situation. Like, what would it be like to be a shepherd in the middle of this field, in the middle of the night, and experience something like an angel appearing out of nowhere? I know for me, as I walk to the deer stand early in the morning before the sun comes up, all it takes is one little crack in the woods, and my heart's like boom, 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 boom. Y'all know what, you hunters, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, you think you're tough, right? I'm a man, and then you walk to the stand, and you're like, ugh, and then you realize it was just a squirrel. So these shepherds, they're watching these sheep overnight and being in this dark field, they're protecting them from predators, and then this angel appears. I would imagine it would be pretty scary. It's an experience that is going on right here. And this angel senses their fear, and he says, do not fear. Do not fear. This was not a getting onto kind of a word to the shepherds. This is not an agitated father like, just get over it. Like, that's not what's happening here. But this is more like a loving, patient parent that is holding their child closely and whispering into their ear, "You're safe. It's okay." Now, why would the angel feel this need to be able to describe this to them? Why shouldn't they be afraid? Because they're about to receive the best news that you could ever imagine, the good news. The person and the work of Jesus. This Greek word here for good news is the Greek word evangelizo, which is the same word that is used for the word gospel, which is actually the same word where we get the word to evangelize, to share the good news of Jesus. And so the shepherd steps into this scene and he's like, listen, don't be afraid, but I bring you the good news of this person named Jesus that you need to hear about. The longing that you and the people of God have had for thousands of years and for generation after generation, where you have told the next generation that this Messiah is coming. I'm giving you this greatest news. This is the word that he's given. Jesus coming to this earth brings great joy because he is the promised one, the one who we find our assurance in, the one that we find our salvation. And so this joy that we're singing about, this joy that we're talking about this morning, is not simply a theory, but it's something that we can hold on to tightly. Let's look in Psalm chapter 45, verse 7. It says this, "You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions." Now, the writer of Hebrews, I believe it's in chapter 9 of Hebrews, references this same passage in Psalm chapter 45 when he talks about this oil of gladness. And he's saying that the writer is saying that God the Father has poured out the oil of gladness on God the Son. That this Messiah that was coming to this earth, this person named Jesus, was not just coming as this warrior king, but he was poured out with the oil of gladness on his life. And when we, as followers of Jesus, when we are doing the life that he has called us to do, to live in the kingdom, to abide in him, and to pursue the things of the kingdom, that same oil of gladness that is poured out on the Son, Jesus, is the same oil that can be stirring in our hearts and our lives today. It is through the person and the work of Jesus that joy has come to this world. The second thing is that Jesus is our example of joy. Jesus is our example of joy. Now, I mentioned this in the intro of how joy and happiness have kind of been made enemies in the modern world. Randy Alcorn, author, theologian, he released, I believe it was last year, a book that's about 500 pages on happiness. It's just titled Happiness. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I could write 500 pages on happiness. That seems like a lot of pages for one word. But this is how prevalent it is. He spent 500 pages of deep theological and scholarly work debunking this idea that joy and happiness are somehow at odds with one another. And so he says that throughout the Old Testament, the Hebrew uses about 22 words that translate as joy. And in the New Testament, there are about 16 words of Greek that translate as joy. And he says that all of them are used interchangeably throughout all of the scriptures. And even historically, in the Oxford Dictionary, not in the modern dictionary, but in the historical Oxford Dictionary, when you would look up the word joy, happiness would be a word that was used to describe it. When you look up happiness, joy was a word that was used to describe it. So, this kingdom life should be a life of joy and happiness. It should be a life of joy and happiness that we live as a light unto the world, that we are bringing the joy that has been poured into our hearts and lives as followers of Jesus, and we can take that same joy into the world. And there should be a wonder in the world of why these people that consider themselves followers of Jesus have so much joy in their life. And I think the question becomes, is that the case for us? Does the world see the church as a people of joy? Does the world see the life that we are living and say, man, I may not agree with everything that the church believes, or I may not agree with everything that Christianity teaches, but one thing I know is that those people are people of joy. Is that the case for us? Is that the story for us? Randy Alcorn, again, he asked this really thought-provoking question. This is some homework for you to go home and study. He says, can you show me one Bible verse that says there's a difference between joy and happiness? I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. There's not. And so if we can't find the difference between joy and happiness in the scriptures, we need to look at the life of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 13, we see this parable that Jesus is giving of this man. It says this in Matthew 13, verse 44. I'm just going to read one verse out of this parable. It says this: the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered it up. And then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and he buys that field. Now, this parable, this guy that is working in this field is more than likely a peasant or a servant. He's a man that's living this ordinary, just normal life, working hard, trying to provide for his family, not a person of status or not a person of popularity. Most of the people of the city would not even know who this person would be. This is just your average, everyday human living life and working hard. And working in his field, he finds this buried treasure. Now, the idea of this parable is this. If you're wondering what part of the story you're playing, is that you are the peasant. You are the servant. You are the one that has been working in the field, and when you find the treasure in your joy, you're like, listen, I'm going to sell everything that I have because it's worth it for what I know and the value of what I just found is. And you know what he's talking about? He's talking about the person of Jesus. I want you to think about this for a moment, what the servant must have felt as he sold everything that he owned. I wonder how that conversation went with his wife. I can't tell you everything right now. We need to sell everything. I've got the greatest plan in the world. Think that went well? No? What if the roles were reversed? If the wife came home and said, honey, I know you think I'm crazy, but we're going to sell everything. I've got a plan. They would end up in some kind of counseling or maybe a court hearing. He finally secures this deal for the land, and Think about how much joy this man must have experienced when he realized, I have found the greatest treasure I could ever find in my life. I sold everything that I own. People think I'm crazy, but I know what I have now. It changed his life. And here's the reality of a life of following Jesus. When we know the value of what we have, we'll do anything to pursue it. When we know the value of what we have found in him and the work that he has done in our life, all the other sacrifices of this life in this world seem minuscule in comparison to the value of who you get in the person of Jesus. That is what this parable is about. It is looking at this life in this lens of this life of Jesus, saying, this is what the kingdom life looks like, is a life of joy and happiness that sometimes it looks ridiculous to the world. Sometimes it looks crazy to those around you, like, why? Like, you shouldn't have joy right now because you're walking through a pretty ridiculous situation, a pretty tough situation. They may not understand the value of what you know the value to be of Jesus. But it's not just in his words that Jesus talks about joy, it's in how he lived. Pastor Darren Roundsen from Garden Church in Huntington Beach says it this way, is that throughout the Gospels, Jesus is feasting, he's celebrating, laughing, he's interruptible, playing with kids, he's never in a hurry, and he's relaxed. You know what that's a picture of? A life of joy. Now, when I hear that list, it's pretty humbling. I look at that list and I'm thinking, like, do I exude any of those? Maybe not all the time, but maybe some of them every once in a while. But I can definitely look at the list and say there's some that I don't do. I'm like, I don't know, interruptible? I don't know about that. Never in a hurry. That kind of flies in the face of our modern world, doesn't it? When we get to the end of our lives, would it be said of us as followers of Jesus, man, they were a person of joy. They were a person of joy. I don't know if that would be said about my life right now. To be transparent, here's what I think would be said about my life at the end of my life. Oh, Derek, he lived with agitation. Anybody else? Anybody else in the room, right? Like, Lindsay, in her love and care for me, maybe a year ago, said, Derek, you live your life like you think everybody's an idiot. I was like, I do. I live with this like that agitation, like it seems like it's always on the surface. Like that's what would be said about me. Derek, oh, he was such a good man. He lived with great frustration. Here's something that we need to keep in mind as we think about the life of Jesus, how he lived, and trying to model our life after that. In these areas that you fall short in, all of us will fall short in those areas. In the areas that you fall short in, there is more grace for you than enough for you to mess up for. You can't out-sin the grace of the Lord. You can't live a life to where you've gone beyond the level of grace. Not to say that we take advantage of it, not to say that we try to use it as a license to sin, but in your shortcomings, know and trust that God has mercy and grace for you. So this kingdom life is meant to be a life of joy. So I ask you and I ask myself, are we living a life of joy? Are we living a life of joy? Does this mean that all of your life is going to be moments of high and excitement and thrill? Like, no, we know that's not to be the reality of our life. We know that there's going to be struggles and pain, really high highs and really low lows. We know those experiences. But in the middle of those experiences, are we looking to the one that can only satisfy us with the joy that we're really longing for? Are we looking to him? Donald McLeod says it this way, is that a joyless life would have been a sinful life. Jesus experienced deep, habitual joy. Those last couple words just mess with me this week. Deep, habitual joy. It's a challenge. Are we a person of joy? Number 3, is that joy is shaped by what we place our trust in. Joy is shaped by what we place our trust in. And this is the difference that I was talking about between joy and happiness and the kind of the wrestling that we have felt in our world and even in a preaching world. It's not really about whether it's joy or happiness, but it is really about where we're trying to find our joy and happiness from. Where are we trying to look for and long for this joy and this happiness in our life? Because if we're putting our joy in the worldly things, we know that it's not going to be lasting. Let me give you a couple examples. You can put your trust and joy in your finances, in your investment account, your savings account, and some of us in the room are like, what are those? You can put it in your salary and you can say, listen, I'm secure. I've got everything that I need and I find joy in being able to provide and do all the things. Like there's something in me that's like, I just get happy when I open up my bank account and I can look at it without being like, oh, I don't know. All it takes is one bad year, one bad financial decision, one bad term of a president, and all those things you can lose your joy in them. Maybe it's in possessions, toys. I know that we're very sophisticated, but we still have toys, don't we? Maybe a new car. You're looking and longing for this new car. You got this brand new car and you're all excited, or you got this new side-by-side, or you got this new boat. Or maybe you got all three. And you're like, man, I'm just living the dream. And I would say this, be my friend. Because it's better to have a friend that owns a boat than for you to own a boat. Amen. All right. But guess what? Even in all those things, what's going to happen? There's always a new model that's going to come out. You're going to purchase your brand new car, and you got the nice mom car, right? You're pulling in the school lane, and you're like, I've got it. Guess what? There's a new model that's coming out. Your child, as loving and caring as they are, going to go to Target, and you're going to go to Walmart, and they're going to slam that door open and just hit something, and you're, right? The joy will quickly go out of your heart. You can find it. You can try to find your joy in your sports team. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can try. They can be winning championships and doing all the things, right? And then all your favorite players get traded away. Astros. What well are you pulling from for your joy? What well are you pulling from your joy? How easy is it for us to go to the worldly things for our source of joy? Psalm 16:11. David writes, it says, you make known to me the path of life, and in your presence there is fullness of joy. There's fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. In your presence is fullness of joy. This is David writing as he's running for his life from King Saul, hiding in a cave, scared for his life. And I imagine David being in this cave in the middle of the night, hiding for his life, kneeling down before God in prayer and worship and just saying, God, in your presence, there's fullness of joy. It's not based off of the circumstances, right? It's not based off of what is happening around him. No, he's looking to the only one that can really fulfill the joy that we really long for anyways. And here's the good news as a follower of Jesus. Wherever you go in this life, you take the very presence of God with you. You don't have to be at church to get filled up with joy. You can be filled with joy on your way to work, even in traffic. You can be filled with joy sitting in your living room, spending time in the very presence of God, just saying, Lord, in your presence, there's fullness of joy. I long for the joy. I'm not going to look for it in the things of this world, but I'm going to look for it in my relationship with you. C.S. Lewis had a really good way of putting it. It says, apparently the world is made that way, is that you can't get a second things by putting them first. You can get second things only by putting first things first. Meaning this, the problem comes when we try to find our joy and happiness in the things of the world and we bypass the very thing that would answer to the problem that we have. We try to say, I'm going to find joy in the things of this world, and we skip over or we pass over the joy that was offered to us in the fullness of who Jesus is. And I want you to think about that for a moment. How often we just go right to the thing, right? Like, I always make a joke about this, but I have an iPhone 13, and I feel like it's like 25 years old. They've done nothing other than make the camera just a little bit better. And I have so much temptation to go to AT&T and spend $1,000 on a new phone. But I'm not, because I'm disciplined. I'm telling myself that. We long to fill ourselves up with joy for other things, and what C.S. Lewis said is right, is if we would just put Jesus first in every area and not just have it on a t-shirt or a plaque on the wall, but we would live our life with Jesus being first, then maybe we would save ourselves a whole lot of heartache as we look for the things in the world and we stop doing that and start searching for it in who Jesus is. And I shouldn't have said that about the phone, because next time I get a phone, I know some of them are going to give me a hard time for it. Number 4 is that joy has to be cultivated. Joy has to be cultivated. Does anyone have that friend that seems like they're never happy? Nothing's ever good enough? Anybody have that friend? What about a family member? If you're thinking, nah, I don't think it's probably you. Right? It may be you. It's the friend that as they're like, you're at dinner and the dinner's this great dinner and you're just enjoying yourself, and the whole time they're like, wish that waiter would come back. You're like, he was here 2 seconds ago. Right? You're like, you're on vacation, you're at this Airbnb and you're all thrilled and you're excited, and they're just like, this place, it's not up to standard. You're like, what? They're always unhappy, right? Like they live this life of cynicism to where it's always something like, something's not good enough. Something should be better. We are so accustomed to living with negativity that for some it may take a while for joy to come back into your life. I struggle with this. I'm a cynical person. I'm always like, I don't know. We'll see. It's not going to work out. You know, like maybe it's self-protection, whatever it is, but I have to wrestle with that all the time. And it can be hard when you live your life like that to live in joy because you're so focused on the negative things. And I'm not talking about this is not like, I'm not counseling you and I'm not giving you psychotherapy, none of those things, but it's just the reality. When you live a life of negativity, it's going to be really hard to live with joy. It's just the reality. I'm going to give you an example. You ever been to a place called Disney World? It's the happiest place on earth. You know who they didn't ask about that? Parents. I've been to Disney 4 or 5 times. Actually, I've been to Disney more since I lived in Texas than when I grew up in Florida. It's weird. Floridians don't like Disney World. It's where all the foreigners are from and all the... That's what we say. I love it. But here's the reality. I've never seen both sides of the couple happy at one moment at Disney World. Somebody's always mad, right? Somebody's always upset. And there's always one part of the spouse couple that's like, it's okay, kids, we're having a blast. And the dad's like, no, we're not. They have this look on their face like, why did I pay this much money to be miserable? It's just the reality. You can go to the happiest place on earth and be miserable if you let it. I've done it. It's great. Because I've learned if you complain to Disney, they just give you free stuff. They're not that funny, all right? No kidding. I'm joking, Kai. It can be easy for us to live cynical and negative. Psalm 51:12. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit. As we go through this life, it can be easy for us to become calloused or numb to the beauty of the joy that we have in Jesus because we've allowed the circumstances around us to dictate the joy or the happiness that we're living with. We can allow those things to kind of shape us and mold us, but if we would learn the discipline of cultivating joy in our lives and just simply saying, no matter what I'm facing, no matter how much stress or worry or anxiety, I can still live with joy. I can wake up each day and choose joy. I want you to bow your heads with me this morning.